All right, let's dive in, shall we? Today, it's Bienvenido N Santos and his story, The Scent of Apples.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
I think it's a story that packs an emotional punch, and it takes us back to a very specific time and place.
World War II. Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Right. And smack dab in the middle of it all, we meet Celestino Fabia.
A Filipino man who's been living in America far from home for over 20 years.
And the story opens with this really vivid scene. You've got that crisp autumn air. An old man is burning leaves.
Oh, yeah?
And you can't forget those gold and silver stars hanging in windows.
Oh, those are heavy. Each one representing a son off fighting in the war.
Yeah, it's a very subtle way to bring in the presence of the war.
It's almost like you can smell those burning leaves, you know,
Ah,
and feel that autumn chill as you read.
totally. But then Santos layers in this other image, right?
Oh, right. The ghost feet of 1,000 autumns.
Yeah, that gets me every time.
It's so evocative.
It really is. What do you make of it?
I think it speaks to this sense of displacement, like walking through a place you once knew intimately, but it now feels strangely empty, haunted even.
Yes. And right into this scene walks our narrator, who's also Filipino and visiting the U.S.
And he just bumps into Celestino.
Well, not exactly bumps into him. Celestino actually drove 30 miles to hear the narrator speak.
Wow. Talk about a longing for connection, huh?
Right. And remember, the Philippines was occupied by enemies during the war.
So for Filipinos abroad, like Celestino, news from home was scarce, often shrouded in silence.
So to have someone like the narrator directly from the Philippines,
Step onto that stage.
it's a huge deal.
It's like a window opening, a chance to connect with a piece of home they desperately missed.
Absolutely. And then during the Q&A, Celestino asks this really loaded question.
Oh, what's that?
He wants to know if Filipino women have changed in the past 20 years.
Interesting. Why that question, though? What do you think he's really after?
I think it's more than just curiosity. There's this yearning, right?
For a home that's frozen in time.
Exactly. Like a place untouched by change and the turmoil of war.
He's clinging to a memory, you know, this idealized vision of the Philippines he left behind.
Yeah. And there's this underlying fear, too, like, what if even the things he holds most dear have been swept away?
Absolutely. And you can see it in how the narrator responds.
How so?
I mean, he could have told Celestino the truth, that yes, things have changed drastically, but instead, he chooses to comfort him. Says the core qualities of Filipino women remain unchanged.
It's like he understands Celestino's need for comfort.
Yeah,
Even if it's a bit of a fragile illusion, Celestino needs it.
it's a really empathetic moment. But it does make you wonder, right?
It's power.
Is the narrator protecting Celestino, or is he perpetuating a myth?
Yeah. And what does that say about our own relationship with memory and nostalgia?
Do we sometimes prefer the idealized version of things, even if it's at odds with reality?
That's a big question.
It is.
But going back to Celestino's question, why the focus on Filipino women specifically? Why not something else?
That's such a good point. It might be tied to the fact that he left home after a fight with his father.
Ah, okay. Leaving behind family, a past he can't seem to shake.
Exactly.
So it's not just about women, it's about that yearning for connection.
To the innocence and purity he associates with his childhood, with a home that might not even exist anymore.
It's like he's holding on to this perfect image, maybe to cope with the struggles of his life in America.
Yeah, could be.
And speaking of America, there's that turn in the story where Celestino invites the narrator to dinner at his farm.
Oh yeah, he's eager to introduce his wife, Ruth.
He is. And he describes her as like our own Filipino women, remember?
Right. I think we're starting to see some tension here.
Totally. Because we know Ruth is an American farm woman. Her hands are rough from work.
A far cry from the image Celestino presented earlier.
Definitely. And I think this contrast speaks to a deeper tension. The life Celestino envisioned for himself and the reality he's built. It's like he's trying to fit Ruth into this mold.
This preconceived notion of what a Filipino woman should be.
Exactly.
But as we'll see, she's anything but a simple character.
Oh, yeah. And I think that dinner invitation is about more than just hospitality.
How so?
It's like Celestino needs to prove something to the narrator, maybe even to himself.
Prove that he's recreated a piece of home here in America.
Right. But the journey to that farm tells a different story.
What do you mean?
You know, the descriptions of the landscape are beautiful.
Yeah.
But there's this sense of decay.
Of things falling apart.
The farm itself is run down. It's a far cry from that idyllic picture Celestino paints.
That's a great observation.
So that's where we'll leave it for now. Our narrator is on his way to Celestino's farm, But I have a feeling this dinner won't be the cozy homecoming Celestino expects.
I think you're right. And it's fascinating how Santos uses that journey, all those details, to foreshadow the emotional journey we're about to go on.
Yeah, it's like the very air is thick with anticipation. And, well, a sense that things are about to be revealed.
Absolutely.
That anticipation is killing me. We left off with our narrator on his way to Celestino's farm, right? So let's dig into this dinner. What happens?
Well, prepare for some pretty stark contrasts, because the reality of Celestino's life is about to clash with all those memories he's holding on to. And remember that question about Filipino women?
Yeah.
Well, Ruth, Celestino's wife, she's about to challenge that whole picture.
Oh, right. Remember how Celestino described her?
Like our own Filipino women?
Yeah. But Ruth, she's an American farm woman. Her hands are rough, red from work.
Not exactly the image she painted, huh?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just a surface level thing either.
You're right. It goes deeper. This tension between the life Celestino imagined versus, the one he's actually living. He's got this narrative in his head about home, and Ruth, she disrupts that narrative.
She does. It's like she's a walking, talking reminder, right? That time keeps moving forward, things change, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. And then there's Roger, Celestino's son.
Oh, yeah, and he looks just like his dad.
Another echo of the past. Like, Santos is putting in all these subtle reminders, even the setting, right?
What do you mean?
The rundown farm, those wilted plants Celestino describes, all these things that haven't quite flourished.
Yeah, I see it. It's very different from those memories of his childhood home in the Philippines.
Right. Those great live posts, remember? Massive tree trunks holding up his family's house.
Yeah.
And it's within this setting that he tells his story. Leaving home, the fight with his father, the attachment to his old house, all of it.
You can really feel the weight of that unresolved past, can't you?
Yeah, it's heavy. This sense of leaving before he was fully formed. Like those plants wilted and died before they could become flowers.
Makes you wonder, did he just run away from that fight with his dad? Or was it something more?
Deeper, maybe. Like he was afraid to become his father or felt trapped by expectations.
It's a question that hangs over the whole story, don't you think? This idea of leaving home, trying to become your own person, separate from your family.
It is. It's something we can all probably relate to on some level.
Absolutely. But, okay, speaking of unanswered questions, there's that photo.
Which one?
The one of the Filipino woman. Celestino says he doesn't recognize her, but then admits it was once a young face and good.
Ah, yeah. Who is she? What's the story there? Such a tantalizing detail. I know. We don't get a clear answer. It's left open. But it makes you think,
For sure. Like, who was this woman? What did she mean to Celestino?
A lost love. A symbol of the life he left behind.
A reminder of the choices he's made.
Maybe. And speaking of things that linger, what about that scent of apples?
It's everywhere in the house, right?
But it's not the fresh, crisp scent you might expect. It's almost heavy.
It is. It starts out pleasant enough, but as the story goes on, it takes on this darker meaning.
Because the back room is full of unsold apples, remember? Rotting away.
Yeah.
That sweetness turns into decay.
Yeah, I see that. Like the apple scent represents this decay of his dream of home. A reminder that things change, and not always for the better.
And it's not just the apples. Remember those wilted plants? Like something within Celestino himself is withered too, unable to fully blossom.
It's a sad thought.
It is. But amidst all this, there's Ruth, holding everything together, taking care of Celestino and Roger, keeping the farm running.
And then there's that story of Celestino's appendicitis.
Oh, yeah. Ruth drives him to the hospital in a blizzard, risks her own health and the baby she's carrying.
It's a huge moment, shows the complexity of their relationship. He's got this image of Filipino women in his head, and yet it's Ruth who's showing real strength, loyalty, unwavering love.
It makes you question how Celestino really sees her.
Right. He says she's like our own Filipino women. Is that a compliment or, a way to diminish her?
Good question. I think it goes beyond just them, though. It touches on how we see other people, especially those closest to us, how our own ideas and desires color those perceptions.
And then, as the narrator's getting ready to leave, Celestino says something heartbreaking.
What's that?
He says nobody back home would remember him. After all these years in America, building a new life, he still feels forgotten.
Like he's adrift between two worlds.
Yeah, it's like he's built this whole life here, but there's still this part of him stuck in the past. Stuck in that idealized Philippines.
Makes you wonder, what if he did go back? Would he find what he's looking for? Or would it just be, another kind of displacement, like realizing the place he remembers isn't really there anymore?
That's a tough one. And I think that's what makes this story so powerful, right? It doesn't give you easy answers. It leaves you with these complicated feelings about memory, about how our past shapes us.
It does. And it doesn't shy away from the bittersweet parts either.
Not at all. It's like that back room full of apples.
Yeah.
So much symbolism packed in.
Yeah, all these layers of meaning. Yeah. And it's up to us, the readers, to sort through it all.
And in our case, the listeners. But what really strikes me is how Santos uses those sensory details. Like, we can practically smell those rotting apples.
Oh, yeah, totally. And feel that chill in the air.
It's so immersive. And it makes the emotional impact even stronger.
For sure. And that ending, oh, man.
The narrator waving goodbye, Celestino driving off, and then that line, cold, like winter straying early.
It's simple, but it says so much.
Doesn't it?
Like that chill just seeps right into you. Mirroring how Celestino's leaving makes you feel.
Exactly. It's all about loss, time passing, memory.
Yeah. It's interesting, though. We never really know if Celestino is happy. You get hints like his pride in his son, but there's always that melancholy, that sense of something missing.
I agree. And I think that's what makes him such a fascinating character. He's not just a good guy or a bad guy. He's complicated.
He is. He's an immigrant, a father, a husband, and he's carrying all this baggage from his past.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that. We all have those memories, those idealized moments we hold on to.
Sometimes to the point where it hurts us in the present.
It's true. But the scent of apples reminds us that it's okay to cherish those memories.
As long as we're open to change.
Right, because life is all about change.
Finding that balance.
Holding on to the past while still living in the present.
It's tough. And I think the story also makes us think about how we see other people, especially those closest to us.
Yeah, like Celestino and Ruth.
Exactly. He wants her to fit into this idea of what a Filipino woman should be. But she's her own person.
And she's strong, resilient.
Makes you wonder if he really sees her or just what he wants to see.
That's a good question for all of us to consider. Are we really seeing the people in our lives, or are we just projecting our own stuff onto them?
Deep stuff.
It is. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the scent of apples, I'm left with this feeling, kind of melancholic, but also really appreciating the power of a good story.
Yeah, Santos really created something special, something personal and universal at the same time.
We've talked about the symbolism, the characters, the themes, but there's always more to uncover.
Always. And as you go about your day, maybe with the scent of apples in your mind, think about this.
Okay.
What are those idealized memories you hold on to? And how do they shape the way you see yourself and the world around you? Something to ponder.
Food for thought. And that's it for our deep dive into the scent of apples.